Welcome back, folks, to the WP-Tonic show. It's episode 534. Yes, 534. And I've got some exciting news. As we told you, Adrian is having to take a sabbatical. He's trying to do some mega improvements and new functionality to his product. A friend of the show has decided to fill his shoes in for a temporary period, Stephen Sauder. And Stephen has been part of the WP-Tonic panel show for at least 6 months now. So he's going to be doing both for a period of time. More mad him. Stephen, would you like to quickly introduce yourself to the listeners and viewers?
Sure thing. My name's Stephen Sauder. Really excited to be here and be a part of this. I am part of zipfish.io, which is a WordPress hosting company, but also focuses on speed optimization. So most hosting companies just host your website. We do more than that. We branch into the code and we optimize the code because you can't really get a fast site unless the servers are fast and the code is fast. You kind of have to know what's going on in both of those two worlds to really make everything tuned together and running as quickly as possible. So I come from a background of kind of the more technical side of WordPress. So I'm really excited to dive in here with Jonathan and kind of learn and figure things out as we go along.
That's great. And what we're going to be doing in this episode, and when I told Stephen that we were going to be discussing this, he just kind of, I could tell he was just biting at the bit to get stuck into this subject because he's the right guy to talk about this. We're going to be talking about hosting. We're going to be talking about the fundamentals in the first half, but then we're going to be going on to some of the new technology, Lightspeed, Vulture. We're going to be delving deep in the world of hosting. And then if we haven't finished the subject, we'll continue a little bit in our bonus content section, which you can see on our WP-Tonic YouTube channel. And please subscribe to our channel. It does really help the podcasting and everything. But before we delve in, I wanted to talk about one of our main sponsors, which is Kinsta. Kinsta is a well-known WordPress-only hosting provider. It uses the power of Google Cloud. It provides a lot more. It provides a really superb UX design interface, all the technology bells and whistles you're looking for yourself and for your clients. Great 24/7 support that I feel is the best you can get, but you don't use it very often because it's Kinsta. And it's just fantastic for WooCommerce, learning management systems, anything that needs some extra oomph. That's what you get with Kinsta. So if that sounds interesting for yourself or for your clients, I suggest you go over there, purchase one of their packages, and also tell them, this is the important bit, tell them that you heard about them on the WP-Tonic show. So let's go straight into it. So let's cover the basics. So it looks like traditionally you had shared hosting, virtual hosting, your own physical server, and then you had Google enter with Amazon Web Services in cloud hosting. So can you give us some details, first of all, what shared hosting is?
Yeah, shared hosting is essentially everybody just being stuck on the same exact server. And I guess just to simplify the idea of a server, it's really just a computer that's sitting somewhere serving up your web pages. So when somebody asks that computer for a specific web page, it'll return that web page to you so you can view that then. And so the idea of a shared server, right, is that a server is partitioned out into a bunch of little different sections that your site can sit on, and 1,000, 150, all depends on kind of what the infrastructure looks like. Sites also sit on there. And so you're sharing the resources of that computer. That means if one site gets hit really hard, but it's not your site, it's just some random site somewhere that's also on your shared server, that means that your site is also going to be impacted by that on a true kind of shared environment.
Right. And it tends to be one of the cheaper options, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really is, because you can really try to fit as many sites as possible. The more sites somebody can fit on a server, right, the cheaper that they can charge for that space. If you can put, if somebody can put 50 sites on a server, or another person can put 10,000 sites on a server, that company that can stick 10,000 sites on a server can charge a lot lower rates than, somebody that can only put 50. And so really the game is from a server architecture standpoint, how many sites can I stick on a server without it going down or without there being massive problems or issues? A lot of times companies that are running these shared server environments are really looking at how they can maximize their profit. They're not necessarily looking as much out for you. They're just trying to provide you a cheap option. So if you don't have much money to spend, it's a great solution and you get what you pay for, kind of thing. So not knocking those guys that are doing it, because for $250, a month, that's ridiculously cheap. Some people have hosting, at that price level. When you do it at that low cost, there's going to be, some side effects. And one of those side effects is that you're dealing in a shared environment where the speed of your site can be fluctuating up and down and going all over the place. You don't have as much control over the resources. You can't see how much resources your site is consuming. It's they just stick your site on a box with 1,000 other sites and keep your fingers crossed, hope for the best. But, you're only paying $250, $5, kind of depends on where you're at, but you're not going to get the best service, but your site's there and it's being served. And, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, that would have been unheard of, those cheap prices. And it's just amazing how low cost it is, which is cool because it lowers the barrier of entry, right? Anybody can throw up a site if you got a couple bucks in your pocket.
So are that type of hosting, does it benefit the most from caching, like using something like WP Rocket or some other caching plugin? And can you explain what caching is? And does it also, if it's provided, or let's say you use something like Cloudflare as your CDN, does it also benefit from you setting up an external CDN the most?
Yeah.
And can you explain what a CDN is as well? Can you?
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff there to unpack. So when we think about the internet and speed, a lot of times one of the first things that people do to solve that issue is caching. And caching is really just the store of information without having to do any processing power behind it. So when somebody goes to an uncached page, what has to happen is it asks for the page information. Then the server has to go find all the information in the database, piece it together, assemble the HTML, send it back to the person that requested it, right? That wants to view that website. That all takes time, and you have 100,000 people doing it at one point in time, and that can really bog down a server and cause even some servers to crash depending on how much headroom you have or how much CPU power you have. The server has to have the resources to keep up with all of those requests, or it's going to start erroring out. So people invented this idea of caching. If somebody's going to your homepage and your homepage looks identical to every single user that visits it, you can cache that entire page, which means it doesn't have to go back to the database, query the database, ask the database for all of this information, assemble the page anymore, because why not just serve the pre-assembled page? Because you already know exactly what it's going to be. So caching is serving of that page almost like a static page to the end user without having to do all this back-end information on the server, all this processing power on the server. And there's kind of two different types of caching that happen in the WordPress world. There's server-side caching, and then there's the WordPress side caching. So, for example, you mentioned WP Rocket. WP Rocket itself is a caching solution, but it has to boot up WordPress to find those cached files. It has to run some process to figure out if it's going to be serving a cache file or not a cache file, how to direct the user. Server-side caching, think of it as a layer above that. So it doesn't even have to ask WordPress for any information. It hits the server coming in. Before WordPress even knows about the request, the server can say, oh, I have a cached page of that. Here, take this. And that's even faster. So you have something like WP Rocket, which is a little bit slower of a cache because it's built into WordPress. And then you have the server-side cache which is above WP Rocket, that can send these static like homepage files or whatever page you're trying to access back to the end user. And then moving from that into what a CDN is, which stands for Content Delivery Network. Think of it as a cached file on other people's computers around the world. So if I am in China and I'm trying to access a website in the United States, that's a long ways to go. Now, light travels really fast, so it doesn't take that long. But when you're talking about site speed, half a second, 1 second makes a huge difference. So what a CDN does is take all those files that can be cached and sends them out around the globe. So now you have your cached files on a server in China and one in the United States and one in Australia and one in Europe. And you have all of these different servers around the world that can send the file faster, because the closer you are to the server, right, the less distance light or that information, right, because information is traveling at the speed of light today, has to travel, the faster you get that website loaded. So the CDN essentially is kind of like caching, except on 1,000, 150, all depends on kind of what mechanisms you have, servers all around the globe to try to get the information as fast as possible to the end user.
Does
that answer the question?
Yeah, I think you did a really good job. And just to summarize, do you think shared hosting, my original question, when it comes to caching and a CDN, can it benefit the most from those two technologies?
Yeah, so the weaker your server, the more your server is going to benefit from caching and from using a CDN. All servers will benefit from that no matter what. You could be spending thousands of dollars a month on a server. It's still going to benefit from caching. It's still going to benefit from a CDN. It'll still be faster if you use those things. But if you're on a shared hosting environment, it matters a lot more, because you just don't have the server resources to handle these dynamic requests coming in. You have to be able to serve these static cached files as much as possible, or else your server is just going to get overwhelmed with requests.
Right. On to the next one, and then we'll probably have to go for a break. It's amazing where the time goes. Is virtual servers. This was the next step up, really. Before you had to buy your own server, physical server, and have it in a data center. And it still seems very popular. So what is that, and what are the benefits with a virtual server, Steve?
Yeah, so virtual servers, generally, like you'll see VPS, virtual private server, will be like the kind of acronym that you see there. It's similar to the shared server, except that you have dedicated resources. So you don't have a server yourself. It's not an entire computer, but you have dedicated resources that you are allowed to use. Therefore, now all of a sudden you can start seeing what are your CPU usage? What is your RAM usage? You have a lot more control because the environment is essentially walled off. It kind of operates as its own server. Technically, it's going to be on the same computer. That's where the virtual comes in. It's a virtual server, meaning that it's like a server within a larger server. And that allows you to have those dedicated resources so that when you pay more, you know exactly what you're getting. You know kind of the stats behind it, how fast you can process information. If you're going to upgrade your server, you know, $10 more is going to get me another CPU. $15 more is going to get me 4 more gigabytes of RAM. Whatever that is, you can start looking and actually having hard metrics. When you're in a true shared environment, you don't really have hard metrics because everybody's using the same pool of resources. You don't know how many people are, queuing things up for the CPU to process, how many databases queries are going on at one point in time. But when you are in a virtual private server,
does it offer? Does it? Well, I suppose it doesn't, because you're still going to have other petitions on this server, aren't you? So I suppose if the other partition, I'm using the term partition.
That's a good word.
If they're under a DOS attack, I surmise it still can affect you, because it's going to affect the whole server, can't it?
Much less than what a shared server environment is going to have. So because you have those dedicated resources, somebody's site gets hit.
Can you explain to the listeners? Can you explain to the listeners what a DOS attack is?
A DDoS attack is when somebody, it stands for distributed denial of service, and it's when 1,000 people or thousands and thousands of people all over the world start hitting your site to try to take it down. So
and that's one of the main reasons why hackers want to hack other people's websites, because it gives them server resources. And
exactly. So you just spin up as many requests as possible from as many different servers or computers around the world as possible to all ask for information from one site. It gets overwhelmed, and then that site goes down because it can't.
And they make money. And am I correct in saying they make money because they try and blackmail certain websites, saying that if you don't give us this money in a Bitcoin or whatever encryption currency that's there forever, they will attack your website for a period of time. Is that correct?
There's a lot of different variations of it. I think one of the most common ones is, for some reason, people don't like a specific company, like a group of hackers get mad at some sort of policy change or, some sort of whatever the company's standing for, people are mad at. And so then they try to attack it. I think it's a little bit less often that you hear of kind of some sort of ransom type thing. Usually that's happened when they can actually hack into the site and take it over. Because a DDoS attack can be mitigated. There's tools to stop that from happening, right? You can start blocking IP addresses. You can make people validate that they're an actual user before they can get to your server. And so you can start putting up some defensive mechanisms around that, but it just becomes really annoying and really frustrating as a website owner when that's going on, and your legitimate users can't get to your site as quickly or as easily.
Right, we're going to go for our break. We're delving deep. I can assure you we're going to delve deep in the world of hosting. We've got a true expert about hosting, Stephen Saunders, my new co-host, my temporary new co-host, and he's the CEO of Zipfish. We'll be back in a few moments, folks. We're coming back. First of all, thanks so much, Stephen, for agreeing to fill in the shoes of young Adrian. It's much appreciated. We're going to go on about our next sponsor, which is Adrian's company, Groundhog. Groundhog, if you're looking for a native CRM system, something similar to ActiveCampaign, Groundhog has become the leader in the WordPress community, I would say. And I think a lot of people would agree with me. I've been really impressed with Adrian and his team's effort to build, which is a very complicated piece of software. And they just improve it. And it's something I've been waiting for because it's been sorely missed in the stack of tools in your WordPress quiver. So what does it do? Basically, it's marketing automation mixed with email. Basically, you can trigger different events, different emails, especially if you've got a WooCommerce site or a learning management system or any kind of site where you have consistent usage and you want clients to come back, buy more, purchase more courses. These are the type of websites where Adrian software really comes in and really benefits you. So I suggest if you're a developer or a power client, go over to Groundhog, and that's with 2 G's at the end, and find out more about it, buy it, use it. I think you're going to be really impressed. Now, so we covered virtual private servers. So the next thing up, until about, I don't know, time goes quick, maybe 3-4 years ago, I don't know, time really flies, was having your own server in a data center, which you could have on a maintenance contract, or if somebody in your team was very brave, you could administrate it yourself, couldn't you?
Yeah, so when you actually have a server somewhere, oftentimes that's referred to as bare metal servers. You're actually have control of an entire server, all of its hardware, all of its resources. It's the most like open system you can have, where you can just really go and do whatever you want because nobody cares, because it's your server. And so if you mess things up and take things down and poke a bunch of holes in it, it's going to be on you to fix it. It's also the most expensive type of server out there usually. So if you are looking at kind of where the price points fall, your bare metal servers are going to be quite a bit higher because you are controlling an entire box. So if you think about, I don't know if you've ever seen those pictures of data centers where they have the rows and rows and rows and all the flashing lights and stuff. If you have a bare metal server, you have one of the boxes that slip inside of those big frames, right? It's an entire computer that just slides in there. That's your entire thing. Generally, you don't want to get involved in that unless you have really, really good reasons, just because things get exponentially more complex. I
think you need a good maintenance contract with
and you'll pay a lot of money for it.
Yeah.
Generally, if you're doing things that are pretty mainstream and pretty standard, you want to be looking into the VPS, the virtual private.
Is there still element of the market that really still needs this, or has this become less popular over the past few years?
It's definitely becoming less popular, at least from what I'm seeing. You look at what like Google's doing, and DigitalOcean and Vultr and AWS. Almost all of that stuff is being sold through virtual private servers, VPS. It's when people think about like cloud and like cloud servers and computing, that's all VPS stuff, because it allows you to quickly scale things up and scale things down, horizontal scaling, vertical scaling. So you have flexibility. Right. Where if you have like an actual computer box, you lose a lot of that. And
so we might as well try and begin the part now. So the whole, we've outlined some of the traditional levels, but in a way it's been imploded because you've mentioned it. We've got Amazon Web Services, we've got DigitalOcean, we've got Vultr. There's a number of them, and how do they fit? So they're virtual private servers, but they're part of these enormous networks owned by these companies. Is that correct?
Yeah. So these companies generally have data centers all over around the world, and when you go up and spin up a new VPS server, you get to choose what data center you're going to go into. And, you can New York City or San Francisco, Chicago, Sydney, wherever geographically large city you want is an option these days. And then so you can spin up a virtual private server in any one of those regions. It makes it really simple. And like in, 10, 15 minutes, you can have a server running with whatever you need on it. You can have, a lot of them will have even like default WordPress kind of installations, one-click WordPress installations that you can click on. That'll set up a server. It's configured specifically for WordPress. I think what's interesting is that a lot of your managed hosting providers like Kinsta or Flywheel or us at Zipfish, we use exclusively VPS servers. So what happens is if you spin up your own VPS server, you're responsible for the security of that server. You're responsible for the maintenance of that server, right? You still have a lot of responsibilities there. But the whole idea of managed WordPress hosting kind of takes that one more level higher.
You deal with it.
Right. And so you as a website owner don't have to worry about that anymore. And it's why like at hosting providers, they'll say like you can have X amount of users or X amount of PHP workers or whatever. It's them trying to kind of cordon off or kind of tell you what they're setting up their server environments for, and what they're anticipating it to be able to handle.
The more traditional like Bluehost, GoDaddy, to some degree SiteGround, are they kind of stuck in the middle where they've got traditional data centers, traditional resources, and then they're slowly moving over. And would I be correct in surmising that they're increasingly trying to move everything over to like platforms like DigitalOcean and similar?
That's a good question. I'm not too familiar with like the inner workings of some of those behemoth hosting companies. I know a lot of them have their own data centers, especially because they were back in like the legacy era where you kind of had to have your own data center to get the website hosting game. And they have, usually when you sign up, you'll see a myriad of options. You can go with like,
which is very, very, that's why I thought we would have this discussion to give some, because it is very confusing, isn't it?
Yeah, it can be extraordinarily confusing. Like if you go to GoDaddy, right, and you're trying to decide what you want to sign up for, right, you can sign up for like a bunch of different standard shared hosting packages, some standard VPS. I think they even have some dedicated bare metal options. They're not focused on WordPress specifically. They're focused on hosting whatever anybody has, and they'll figure out a way to get that on their server. But when you go the route of a true managed hosting, you don't have to think through as many of these like logistic or options, because somebody like Zipfish like us, or Kinsta or Flywheel, right? They're specialized in WordPress. That's what they're doing. That's what they're setting up. There's only so many options out there for how to set up a WordPress site. So it becomes a little bit simpler and a little bit more straightforward. And I think the stability is a little bit greater too, because they're only doing one thing and that's what they specialize in.
So I think we're going to have bonus content, folks, because we haven't mentioned Lightspeed or Vulture yet, which we are going to do in the bonus content. Which
I have opinions on those.
And also going to be asking some more difficult questions for Stephen. So hope he's prepared. So we're going to have a feast, which you're going to be able to see on the WP-Tonic YouTube channel. So if you want to learn about Lightspeed and Vulture, go over there and see the bonus content. Now, Stephen, what's the best way for people to find out more about you, what you're up to, and obviously your knowledge, which you've clearly shown well during this episode?
Head over to zipfish.io. We do WordPress hosting, where we focus on speeding up your site by optimizing the server and the code that's on your server. So kind of think of us as the managed of the managed hosting, right? We get as involved with your WordPress site as possible to make sure it's as fast as possible. And if you have any questions on server or architecture or how to set things up, open the chat, shoot me a message. Would love to set up time to just kind of hear what you're working on, maybe some of the challenges, or just answer questions. I always like helping people out. Servers can be complex and hard to wrap your mind around, especially with all the different options out there. So if anybody has any questions or want any help, like just talking through server stuff, head over to zipfish.io, reach out.
That's great. And I just want to remind the listeners and viewers that we're doing an educational webinar with Adrian, the CEO Groundhog, on the 6th of October. It's coming up quick. Basically, we're going to be delving in everything you need to know if you have a course-based website and you want to use marketing automation to make it more profitable. We're going to go through 3 essential ways of doing that. Plus, we're going to really just have a real feast about marketing automation. You're going to be able to ask Adrian questions directly, which is a great thing to do if you're interested in marketing automation, but you just can't get it started. Like I say, that's going to be on the 6th of October. That's a Tuesday. It's going to be at 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. How do you join us? It's really very easy. You go to the WP-Tonic website. In the main menu, right on the far right, there's a button that says free webinar. You click it and then you can sign up for the webinar. And I suggest that you join us. It's going to be fantastic. So like I say, we're going to close the podcast part of the show, but join us on the bonus content where we're going to be talking about Lightspeed and Vulture. We'll see you next week with either another great internal discussion or a great guest in the WordPress space. We'll see you soon, folks. Bye.
See ya.
Right, so let's delve into it. Lightspeed. What is Lightspeed? It's caching, but it seems to be the darling of a certain niche of the WordPress community. What is it, and what's your opinions about it?
Yeah, Lightspeed is something that has really kind of risen up in the last couple of years. So really, there's kind of like three major technologies when you're thinking about WordPress hosting. There's 1,000 different like server stuff out there, but like with WordPress, like oftentimes what you're seeing is Apache hosting, which is the web server that's running on the Linux server. Then you have Nginx, and then you have Lightspeed. And Lightspeed's kind of the new person to the game, but they've actually been around since about 2003. It's only more in the last couple of years that they've really risen in popularity. And primarily, it's because they've invested a lot of resources into crafting things for specific like WordPress or Drupal or different kind of web-based frameworks. If you look at Lightspeed, there is tons of marketing going on right now about how much faster Lightspeed is than Nginx. You go to their site, they have all these sort of metrics, like saying they're 20 times faster. We've actually tested Lightspeed out significantly because, like, you know, when you hear of new things, like you got to see what's going on.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Am I correct in saying that X was developed by Facebook to some extent, was it?
That what was?
X.
Nginx?
Nginx. Was that developed by Facebook to some extent?
I don't think so. Nginx was around since 2004. I don't think Facebook was a thing back then.
No, that can't be them. So I apologise. So who's the people? Is it a commercial company behind Lightspeed then?
So kind of like WordPress, where there's WordPress.org and WordPress.com, there's Lightspeed Enterprise and Open Lightspeed. Open Lightspeed is kind of like the open source version that you can download a copy of and start using.
So it's like a Red Hat kind of setup. There's a commercial one. Yeah, right. Yeah.
Exactly.
Sorry to interrupt. You were in full flow there. And I just
gotta get back into my train of thought. So there's all these really amazing speed claims about Lightspeed. And here's what after like running tons of load tests and kind of just seeing what runs the fastest, really Nginx out of the box versus Lightspeed out of the box. Lightspeed is significantly faster because Lightspeed, like when you do like their default WordPress installation, like how they want you to set it up, right? Coming from Lightspeed themselves, you start off with the Lightspeed caching plugin, which automatically gives your site caching, where Nginx does not necessarily do that out of the box. You have to configure that later on. Now, if you're on a managed hosting provider, that configuration is already done. You're not going to see the difference. But if you're doing it yourself, let's say you have your own server, you're spinning up your own web server, and you're testing out Open Lightspeed versus Nginx right out of the box, Lightspeed is significantly faster because it has that caching mechanism built in, meaning it doesn't have to go back to the database and ask for information every time it's trying to build a page in WordPress. One caveat I feel like I do have to mention is that all of our testing has been around WordPress. Since we specialize in WordPress, that's what we're looking into. So I don't know how this performs with other systems or setups. But on WordPress, that caching out of the box gives them the ability to say they're 20 times faster, because when you don't have to hit the database, you can serve 1,000 times more users, right? Users are coming in like crazy. You're just sending out content because you don't have to go back and ask the WordPress database for information. Nginx, default setup, it's going to have to do that. And that slows you down. But Nginx has what most people use is called Redis, which is the caching mechanism. And Fast CGI is another caching mechanism. They have these mechanisms that allow you to cache a page. And when you can cache a page on the server-side caching, Nginx versus Lightspeed server-side caching, virtually indistinguishable. You can't, there is no difference in speed, except the Lightspeed caching plugin gives you optimization settings like WP Rocket or Optimize. So if you use those optimization settings and their caching stuff, it's fast and faster than just using Nginx, server-side caching, no optimization. But if you would install Optimize or WP-Rocket, and they have like this Nginx configuration thing that you can do on WP-Rocket to make it even faster. But if you do that, your servers are going to perform nearly identical. We have not seen any significant improvement when utilizing Lightspeed over Nginx if you duplicate the functionality that Lightspeed gives you with some other plugins in your standard
it's fascinating.
WordPress.
So it's not lying, but it's not.
It's all in the nuances. Like they're not. Their claims aren't
like so
untrue.
much of life is like that, isn't it?
It is. Their claims aren't untrue, but they're a little like on shaky ground.
Really looked at that in great detail.
Yeah. So I think it's also important to note that almost every large server company that is doing managed WordPress hosting is using Nginx. There are very few that are doing Lightspeed, open Lightspeed. And the reason why is just there's a lot more history with Nginx. So people know how to solve problems a little bit better, a little bit faster.
Funny enough, the hosting provider, the partner that we use for our learning management package, they're using Lightspeed actually. It's quite interesting. But thanks so much. You clarified that very clearly. Like I say, there's a lot. I don't think it, like what you've just said, it's not misinformation, but there's just a lot more to it than what a lot of people are saying. So let's get on to Vultr, because this is the other darling that quite a few WordPress pundits have been pushing lately. And it's saying it's going to revolutionize hosting. It's so much better. What's the reality with Vultr then, Stephen?
Yeah, so Vultr is just another server provider like DigitalOcean, like AWS, like Google Cloud Compute. They're in the same exact bucket category. They just have really low prices for what they have to offer. And from our testing and everybody else's testing that I've seen, like they hold their own, like they're fast. And they have this section of servers that they call their, what do they call it? Everybody.
Higher frequency, lower.
Yeah, high frequency. I think they call it high frequency.
Everybody kind of has their own little name. It's superb marketing spill, isn't it? High frequency servers, isn't it?
All of them, all the hosting companies have like their little like names that they use for different stuff. But high frequency servers essentially is a CPU that can process more information faster. So if you have two CPUs that are high frequency, it can process more information than two CPUs that are not high frequency. There's a lot of technical stuff behind it, but just like cut and dry, that's the difference. And Vultr has probably the cheapest option that has the best performance. Like performance to dollar value is pretty off the charts with Vultr. Interestingly,
where did these people come from and where are they based? Do you know?
That's a good question. I actually don't know where they're based.
Are they based in the Kremlin, by the way?
Possibly. But no, so everybody's been really happy and really excited about it. But like the last 2 weeks, Vultr has been having a really hard time keeping some of their data centers up. I think their Sydney data center was down for like 6 or 7 hours over the last couple of days. Or last week for a few days. And when you have data centers that go down and it takes you a long time and you're missing your SLAs, which is just your guaranteed uptime, like 99 point whatever percent uptime. If you're missing those, people start freaking out because what does that mean? What's going on behind the hood? Like if you can't keep your servers up and running and it's not the website's problem, right? It's Vultr's problem. People start panicking because if those go down, sites go down, you start losing money.
Not good.
Not good at all. No. So that it's just been like an interesting thing. Like it's been cheap, it's been great, but all of a sudden they kind of ran into a couple of issues this last 2 weeks. So it'll be interesting to see if they can pull it out. They're also kind of like a weirdly secretive company. They don't tell you very much about like what's going on.
They're based in the Kremlin, aren't they?
Yeah. DigitalOcean, if they have like an outage, they will tell you exactly what happened, how they fixed it, what they're going to do.
That doesn't sound very good. Is that different to some of the other providers?
Yeah, like DigitalOcean is very transparent, very open. Vulture's just like, what, something's down, our status indicator says it's up. And like everybody in the world's like, no, it's down. And they're like, well, it was down. You're right. We fixed it. And like, that's it. Like nobody has status information. They don't tell you how long it's going to be down usually. It's just, but I mean, again, it's what you pay for. You get cheaper servers, you get cheaper service oftentimes. But if you want to test out like what a high frequency CPU would do for your website, I would say spin up a Vulture server. It's really easy, really fast.
So
move your site over there. Check it out.
It's not total spin. High frequency is something new that will make a difference. Well, it will make a difference if all the rest of your site is optimized. I suppose if there's other bits, if you got plugin conflict, you got a ton of JavaScript loading. You got to get everything else in order, but it does make a difference in the testing that you've seen.
Yes, for sure. And it's not just Vulture that's doing it. Like everybody, like there's been a huge push of people moving to Google stuff. All of that stuff is generally this high compute stuff. Like it's CPUs that are optimized for computation, for serving out these web pages as fast as possible. So like, it's not just Vulture that does this. A lot of other companies and services have stuff like this. It's just that Vulture has this price point right now and they're offering, it's just like this incredible mix.
Well, do you think they are subsidizing it to get market volume?
I don't know. It's a good question. I don't really know like how they're able to.
Well, the Kremlin have got big pockets, haven't they?
I guess so.
Vulture, please do not send me a letter. It's just, I apologise. It's just English humour, listeners and views. I am not in any way, shape or form saying Vulture is actually linked to the Kremlin. It's just English humour. I'm going to ask you a difficult question now here, and I'll be interested to see what you... Now, with Kinsta, WP Engine yourself, you're at a certain price points, and then you have the other darling of a certain clique of WordPress junkies and commentators, and that's Cloudway. Now, Cloudway, their prices are very, very attractive, substantially lower than Kinsta, WP Engine, and yourself, and a host of dedicated WordPress hosting providers. Why shouldn't I just go to Cloudway? And what is the... And I'm sure you've looked at their pricing model in great detail. Do you want to attempt to answer that question, or would you just
I think it's a great question.
Get what you pay for, basically, which you've just said with Vulture, really?
Yeah. So here's what the big difference is. With something like Cloudways or RunCloud, there's like a whole bevy of these.
There is. Cloudway is the one.
Essentially, what they are management panels for servers. So you still have to buy and you own your own server. You're paying for that server. You can do whatever you want with that server. Cloudways sits on top of that, and it's just a management panel for you to interact with that server.
But they offer support as well, don't they?
Yeah, they offer some level of support. So, like, you don't have to SSH.
Level. What do you mean by level?
For instance, Cloudways will host whatever you want. Like, they have, like, I don't know all their different, like, setups because I haven't, like, looked into it, but they have a lot. There's, like, you could host a Drupal site on it. You could host, some React app on it, a Laravel site on it. Like, you can do all of these different stuff. So
Oh,
with that,
I,
that means they're not
yeah,
specialized in
yeah,
one area, and their focus is primarily on the server itself. So if you have questions about your WordPress site outside of that server context, their support becomes a lot worse than what like our support is, where we're focused 100% on WordPress, only on WordPress, and so much so that we help optimize your code, right? And we're inside of your site. We know what plugins you have installed. We know what conflicts are happening if there's errors. We can look at the logs and dissect that. We've built, plugins ourselves, so we know how that operates underneath the hood. And so in that realm, right, we can help out with the server side of stuff, but also deeply on the WordPress website side of stuff. Cloudways, they'll help you out with the server stuff. They have great support on the server side. But if it comes to like, how is WordPress and plugins interacting with that server, that's where things get like support gets a little bit more sketchy. So I would say like Cloudways is a little bit more advanced, and it's really great until things maybe go wrong from a more WordPress standpoint.
yeah. I understand what you're saying, and I think you've explained that very clearly. And thanks for that, because what I think Stephen's saying is, and I haven't heard it being explained in that way, but it makes total sense, is Cloudway, they're experts on servers, and they will provide really excellent support if you're having a server problem. But if it's a problem, if it's a combination problem, and I've just made up that term, it's quite good, isn't it, listeners and viewers? Combination. What I mean that is, you find a lot of problems are kind of mixture of WordPress with server problems. You get one of these problems, which I call a combination problem. And you can clear it up on the server side, but it still won't go away because it's also been caused to some extent by the WordPress. And we're a support company. We specialize in the support of learning management entrepreneurs, that courses. If you want to sell your knowledge on a course, we'll support your site. We build your site on WordPress, and that's what we specialize in, learning management systems. That's where we have planted our flag, and we provide hosting because we found that we couldn't guarantee the kind of performance that our clients were looking for unless we had some control over everything. And the hosting side of things is a major part of that. But I think you've explained that, and I think a lot of pundits, and I won't name them, but a lot of pundits don't really just explain things so well as what you've just explained it. And they also, because they understand things to a certain level, a level higher than even the average power WordPress user. When it comes to the server side, even power users that have been using really don't know anything about it, nor do they want to know anything about it. And they tend to underestimate their knowledge. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I 100%. Like the server side of stuff is a completely different ballgame than the building of a website or installing of plugins or managing web content and stuff like that. Like they're just like two very different spaces, which is why we got into the speed optimization space, right? Because you have to have knowledge on both sides of the equation to make a site really fast. You have to understand what's happening on the WordPress code plugin side. You also have to understand what's going on the server side. And being able to bridge that gap is really where Zipfish sits, right? We like sitting in that space where we can help you do what you do best and understand what you're doing, and making sure the servers are tuned to be able to handle that and to be able to serve that content as quick and fast and efficient as possible. Right. But it is kind of two different worlds, and trying to bridge those worlds can be really hard at times. There's nothing more frustrating than messaging a server company and being like, hey, I have an error on their site. And they're like, oh, it's a plugin. Go talk to the plugin developer. And then you talk to the plugin developer and they're like, well, it's not my plugin. It's actually this other person's plugin. And you get into this whole round robin stuff. And that's what we try to prevent, right? Like if there's one place of information, Zipfish, right? If we can just be there and understand exactly what's going on with your site and your servers, you ask us for help. We don't have to point to a plugin, which points to another plugin. And then you spend weeks trying to solve some little error. If we can see everything, we can fix it right away, right there.
It sounds like he's trying to replace my company. I hope you're not trying to do that. Because
No,
that's not on
if you
actually.
want business ideas and business decisions, Jonathan's your man. He can help you think through it from like an LMS build out standpoint.
Well, I would suggest that you, but I think you're a fantastic partner for a support company, because a support company, we're regularly in that circle that you've just described, and I think you'd be a fabulous partner. But we're going to end the show. I think we've covered a ton, and Stephen's been really on ball, and he's been really open, and you've answered all my questions. I've been throwing loads of questions at you that have multiple elements to them, and you've coped with it all superbly. Thank you so much, Stephen. And we'll be back next week, like I say, with we've got a guest next week. I've rounded up, so I think some really interesting guests. And I think in the last quarter of this terrible year that almost all of us want to forget as quickly as possible. It's been a disastrous year for all of us. In some shape or form would be an understatement. So we're going to power through this in the last quarter, me and Stephen, and I'm sure you're going to be entertained. So we'll see you soon, folks. Bye.
See you later.